Because creatives run the gamut of roughly a 5-year career. Some last a little bit, some last longer, but by and large, it's about 5 years of doing the job. And by the way, some of it's because it's an exhausting job working in that, you're driving in a car 150 miles an hour, 24/7, and it never ends. So when you're at that pinnacle of your career, it kind of burns you out. You get a little bit tired. And to have the stamina to do it for a long time, it's tough. It's really tough. So you got to understand who those players are and how do you connect with them. And the way you connect with them is you understand their names. What shows have they worked on? Who do they work with? You're not going to get to, I use the example of Joss Whedon all the time, although that's probably a little dated. But are you going to get to Joss Whedon? Probably not. Are you going to get to his staff writer who has worked on 3 or 4 shows he's produced in the past? Maybe. Are you going to get to the assistant? Of course you are. And you're going to have to make those connections. And how do you do it? And how do you use those connections to help propel your career into some place where you're doing a job that is inside the industry? Don't be a bartender. Don't be a waiter. Don't be an Uber driver. That's not going to get you a job as anything in this business. Maybe an actor, but it's very uncommon. And if you're an actor, you need to know who the casting directors are, not the directors and definitely not the producers. The directors might give you a job, but the producers will never, ever get you a job as an actor unless they're a producer, writer, hyphenate. But if you're talking to a producer, they're only there to get in your pants. It's that simple. They're not going to get you a job.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. Today is game day here at PYP, which means I have an amazing guest who is going to share with us his leadership journey story, as well as insights about how we can all do better, get more, enjoy life at a bigger scale or lesser scale, as the case may be. I'm excited to talk with him today because he is the first of his kind to come on the Play Your Position podcast. His name is Tim Tortora. Tim, are you ready for kickoff?
I am. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. So we are going to get right into the meat of the conversation here in a second. But team, here's a little bit about Tim to set the stage. He is an ex-movie producer and outsourced CFO for producers in Hollywood. After 30 years in the film and television industry, working with influential companies such as Harpo Films, Sony Pictures, Disney, TriStar Pictures, and Columbia Pictures, Tim uses his expertise to help film and TV writers, directors, actors, producers, and crew learn how to get connected to the real producers in Hollywood so they can build their careers and network. He's got a book he's going to be talking about, but first, Tim, would you tell us about when you got the call to leadership? How old were you? What was the context of your life at the time? Was it an obvious moment when you knew, or was it more gradual, or was it something else?
It was obvious, and I knew. I was almost 31. And I was promoted from a production accountant working in television, movies, and features, from that job up to the seat of the head of physical production for Oprah Winfrey's film and TV unit in LA as, a young executive. It's called, the title is a production executive. And I knew at that moment, I was essentially Oprah Winfrey's producer who was representing her interests on the movies that we made. And I did everything from budgets to schedules, sitting on the set, approving costs, approving checks. I mean, the whole thing. So from that moment forward, I was no longer just a guy whose job was to count the beans or do whatever I was supposed to do. I came up in the trenches, started as a tape op in a recording studio, 15 years earlier. And actually not quite 15. I would have been 18 or 19, I think, when I started. But nonetheless, that's when I knew I was in a leadership position and everything had to change. And my career exploded from that moment forward.
Okay. In what ways? I mean, that's such an interesting story because you knew. Not everybody I've talked to knew. So I'm curious, what was it about that just cemented for you? Wow, I'm here. I'm a leader.
Well, part of it was because I'd been around for whatever, for 10 years working in physical production. And I had seen the people who were doing the job I now had. And I had set my goal when I was 25. I wanted that job by the time I was 30 years old. And I got it in January, February of my 30th birthday. I turned 31, I think, in May. I know my birthday's in May. But nonetheless, anyway, I got it right before my 31st birthday. And it was a goal of mine to have that job. And I had seen the people who were doing it ahead of me. And I knew that there is a chasm between becoming an executive and working in the senior ranks in Hollywood and everybody else who works below them. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who do jobs: grip, electric, camera, props, set dress, acting, writing, directing, whatever you want to call it. All of those jobs are the jobs that actually make movies and television. And the production executives work for the studios, the financiers, and the television networks. And I had seen for 10 years who those people are. I saw the job they did. I saw how they treated people, some very badly and some very well. And I knew once I got to that seat that I was going to be in a different place, and I had to change everything about the way I did my job and the way I thought, the way I treated people. And I had to make decisions. That was the thing for me, was when there's 100 fires and you got 20 people coming at you with 5 fires each, you have to look at them and say, yes, no, do this, do that, move, next.
Oh, wow.
Every morning. And I had seen that every day for 10 years. So that's why.
How would you describe leadership in Hollywood?
It kind of runs the gamut from having a terrorist in your car driving across the country to having really kind people who understand the job, the creative, what they're supposed to do. And when you get into a leadership position, you have to be making decisions and telling people what to do. So it kind of runs the gamut, right? We've heard about the terrorists. We know who they are. They're Harvey Weinstein. They're Scott Rudin. It's, you may not have heard about them on the outside, but their reputations precede themselves, right? Harvey, obviously, we've all heard about him because he's now sitting in Rikers serving a sentence for, criminal behavior. But as far as the Scott Rudins of the world, and I don't mean to single Scott out, he's just been in the news in the past year, but there are there are some people like that. They basically rule by fear and intimidation. And my experience is that kind of behavior comes from fear, their own fear, not knowing what to do, how to behave. And they learned it from the people before them. And some of it is because this is a business that is a copycat business. You find something that works and you just repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And then when it stops working, you look for the next thing. And the thing that works doesn't come across very often. It comes by every now and again, maybe 1 or 2 every 3 years. And then everything else is just kind of copycat, a slight riff on it. So we're not really doing anything in the business of making television and feature film that's all that different and revolutionary. And we're doing it in a space where anybody can steal your idea, tweak it a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's theirs, right? So everything we do is based on speed and being current and finding the thing that's different from all the stuff that's come before, because people get bored. People get bored of, and they're going to get bored of, the movies they're watching now. All the Marvel and DC Comics stuff, eventually people are going to get bored. And the way they get bored is they don't show up. You make a $200 million movie and you make $50 million in the box office first weekend, and maybe you make another 100 over the next 10 years. And you're like, oh my God, I just lost $100 million, right? And that's just on production, not to mention marketing. So
wow,
you're making big decisions at speed and at scale, drinking from a fire hose every day. And it's terrifying for some of these executives, and they don't quite know how to often deal with it. So they turn terrible.
Wow.
And then there's other people who are smart, they get the business. They understand it's a throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks business. And you lay into what sticks and you sweep everything else away and move on to the next, right? Try to control your cost as best you can. And when you find the things that works, you lay into it and do it over and over until the next one comes. So that's kind of characterizing the business in a nutshell. It's oversimplifying it, obviously.
Sure.
But, leadership is, I think it comes from being secure in the knowledge that you know the business you're in. And when that kind of way of understanding is presented with leaders who are calm and smart and understand their business and their place in it, they're usually pretty cool about it. And the ones who don't or learned from somebody else who didn't, they can be terrorists in your car driving across the country, and it's not fun.
Sure. No, I don't sign up for that. And you've written a book. You have put your knowledge, your wisdom. You want to give back. You want to help this next generation of creatives. And that's a big umbrella, I know. But talk to us about your book, why you wrote it in more depth, and what readers can expect from it.
Well, I started blogging about the industry about 5 years ago. And the focus of my blog is, this is how the business works. And if you're getting some other nonsense coming at you, in other words, and when I say nonsense, I mean somebody who says, hey man, you want to be an actor? Give me $2,500. I'll print you in the book. You're going to be huge. It's going to be great. I can't stand that stuff. Or, crew, come work on my movie. It's going to be great. We're going to run the festival circuit. Oh, by the way, you're working for free and we own the intellectual property, but it's going to be great. You're going to get a huge credit, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff doesn't exist. And I started blogging about, here's how the industry really works. Here's how the players function. The players meaning the people who make decisions. And if you see something different than this, it's probably nonsense. There's nothing wrong with pursuing it for a little while, maybe 2 or 3 times, but you got to get connected to people who actually can make stuff happen. So it started there. And then I kept getting the same question over and over, which is, well, how do I get someone to see my material? And I realized young people who are coming into the industry, they don't really understand how the business works. And it makes total sense. And a lot of what they hear is, just do whatever it takes. And It's not about that. It's about developing a network inside the industry. So I go through in the book a methodical way of, how does the industry work? Who are the players who are real? Who are the players that are not? How do you identify them? Because today the players that are real are this list of people, right? In 5 years, that list is going to change. In 10 years, it's going to be completely different, because creatives run the gamut of roughly a 5-year career.
Really?
Some last a little bit. Yeah, some last longer, but by and large, it's about 5 years of doing the job. And by the way, some of it's because it's an exhausting job working in that, you're driving in a car 150 miles an hour, 24/7, and it never ends. So when you're at that pinnacle of your career, it kind of burns you out. You get a little bit tired. And to have the stamina to do it for a long time, it's tough. It's really tough. So you got to understand who those players are and how do you connect with them. And the way you connect with them is you understand their names. What shows have they worked on? Who do they work with? You're not going to get to, I use the example of Joss Whedon all the time, although that's probably a little dated. But are you going to get to Joss Whedon? Probably not. Are you going to get to his staff writer who has worked on 3 or 4 shows he's produced in the past? Maybe. Are you going to get to the assistant? Of course you are. And you're going to have to make those connections. And how do you do it? And how do you use those connections to help propel your career into some place where you're doing a job that is inside the industry? Don't be a bartender. Don't be a waiter. Don't be an Uber driver. That's not going to get you a job as anything in this business. Maybe an actor, but it's very uncommon. And if you're an actor, you need to know who the casting directors are, not the directors and definitely not the producers. The directors might give you a job, but the producers will never, ever get you a job as an actor unless they're a producer, writer, hyphenate. But if you're talking to a producer, they're only there to get in your pants. It's that simple. They're not going to get you a job. I don't mean to be reductive about it.
No, I mean, I like raw conversations. I don't, no sugarcoating here. You tell it like it is. And this is good because with the rise of social media and the the ability to find information for what there's so much bad information out there. And for you to come along and say, listen, this is what you guys need to know. You got to understand how business works. You've got the creative chops, great. But if you don't understand how the business works, forget about it.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Creative chops will only get you so far.
Yeah.
Creative chops I like to say that the creative isn't the actual doing. Creative is in the idea. If you're creative and you have ideas, you're never going to have a shortage of ideas. You'll have too many ideas, actually, and you're going to have to pick which ideas you want to pursue. That's a true creative. That's true talent, right? And I don't love the term talent because I think it's more skill. This is a business where you will learn to do a creative thing by repetition, whether it's an actor, writer, director, or producer, which aren't really all that creative. And producers, by and large, in their singular title, are kind of going away and have been for 15 to 20 years. But nonetheless, putting that aside for a second, there are some still just pure producers. But the creative arts in filmmaking and in television is a learned skill. It's not innate. It's nothing you're ever going to pick up just by showing up. You learn it by repetition and practice and doing it over and over. And the only way you do that is by getting jobs and getting connected so that you can do them over and over.
Mm-hmm.
If you're young and you're coming up and you're developing that skill, you are the luckiest creative producers or the producers of creative in the history of the human race for one simple reason. A movie can be made on an iPhone or an Android phone and edited on free software and exhibited in free platforms to hundreds of millions of people around the world. If you can connect with them and build an audience, then you have built something that no one else in the history of the human race has ever had the ability to do from your bedroom. That has never happened. So you're lucky. You're growing up at a time when you get to do that. In the past, you had to show up in Hollywood. You had to come to Los Angeles, and it all happened in LA. It still, to some extent, happens in LA. And you had to come here. You had to show someone you had the skill to do this job in some way. And if you were a director, that was really hard because you had to buy film, develop film, push it through a camera, put light on it, the whole thing. That's gone. Now it's all digital and you can do it anywhere. And you have the opportunity to demonstrate your skill in many different ways. And the same is true of music. And I use, oh gosh, I'm going to forget her name. I'm not going to, I just did. Who's the girl whose brother, they became huge. I'll think of it. But at any rate, they had created music in their bedroom using Pro
Billie
Tools.
Eilish.
Thank you. Billie Eilish and her brother created music and they put it up on YouTube. Those two creators put that music out into YouTube and they got 150 million hits on their songs before they ever signed a label deal.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened. It didn't exist until the past 10 or 12 or 15 years. That is amazing. And that's happening. And eventually, I think the studio system will go away and direct to consumer from creative to the people who actually watch will be the norm and not the exception.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Okay, I want you to talk about that because again, you have a very specific seat at the table, Tim, with your long history in it's not even old Hollywood. It's like the 90s Hollywood, the late 80s Hollywood, whatever. 30 years is a good amount of time that you've seen some tremendous changes, including the one you just described.
Yeah.
Are we, for people listening who are creators and have the phone, the dream? I mean, on a side note, I've noticed that Apple, one of their advertising campaigns right now for the new phone, which as of this recording is the Apple iPhone 14 Pro, what they're showing to sell the phone is somebody making a movie. That's what they're showing. Mm-hmm. Not dialing grandma, not talking to your best friend. In fact, the phone, nobody ever talks about the phone to use it as a phone. it's a device to create and share. That's what it's become. So have we reached the tipping point of the Billie Eilish and also the Justin Bieber? He was discovered on YouTube as well. Yeah. And they were early, air quote, early to the game for this volume of people that are just beginning to wake up to this reality and say, oh, there's opportunity here. Have we reached the tipping point, to quote Malcolm Gladwell? Are we still on the rise towards that? When will this become the norm? And then nobody cares. I don't know. I'm just curious what your perspective is.
Technologically, we're past the tipping point. So you can create whatever you want, however you want. In fact, Sean Baker is a filmmaker who made a movie called Tangerine, which is about a transgender woman. And this is going on. God, I worked with Kevin, a producer friend of mine, who is also a client. It produces for Sean. And he was making, I want to say Tangerine 10 years ago. And he won a Spirit Award, and it was all shot on his phone. And he wanted to do it. The motivation for them was, I don't know if they could find financing or not. I can't remember. But they wanted to make this movie a particular way. And, that's just how he likes to work. And he's like, well, I don't need all that other garbage. I'll just take a couple of friends and people who are experienced and go make the movie on a phone. So technologically, the idea and the concept has been around for at least 10 years. And Sean was very early in the arc of that process and did well, which parlayed him into the next movie, which was The Florida Project, which with Willem Dafoe and did very well. Critically. I don't know whether or not it made a lot of money. I don't remember, but it's a good movie. And it was made Sean's way, not with an iPhone, but it was made his way, which is a lot different than the way the systems work. And by the way, we haven't changed how we make movies, with the exception of probably the recent Star Wars process. We haven't changed how that works in almost 100 years. You put a camera in front of people, you light in a direction, you turn around, you shoot the opposite direction, you go on to the next setup, right? That hasn't really changed in almost 100 years. Technology has changed significantly, but the process hasn't really changed. The Mandalorian changed that significantly. Now you shoot in one direction and you change the plate and the backgrounds behind them. So you're not wasting time relighting to turn the camera around to shoot in the opposite direction. You just change the plate. It's behind the actors, and you don't have to move light. You don't have to move camera. You don't have to move grip. None of it. And you cut 40-minute setup times down to 5 minutes because you change a plate and you turn on the lights and you put actors and you turn them around. You move the actors, not the set. That's what's changed. Right.
And is that happening across the board now?
Not across the board, but everyone's looking at it. Well, they have been looking at it for the past couple of years. They're like, what's this? Wait a minute. We don't have to sit around for an hour in a feature setup, turning around directions. So that's all happening. And a lot of it's been going on for a while because of digital technology. I like to say that a lot of the Marvel movies, they're basically adult cartoons. There's not a single frame in those movies that doesn't have some kind of digital drawing in them. So actors aren't really acting against anything. They're actually having to act now because there's not a physical thing there. It's digital in many instances. So, that's been going on for a while, but Mandalorian really significantly changed that process. So the answer to your question is technologically, yes, we're there. It's happening. It's been evolving for about a decade. What's missing is the ability of creatives to develop a skill such that they can get the attention of buyers to open up their wallet and pay them. That's the chasm we have to close. And I don't know how that's going to happen yet, because in order to compete with Netflix $17 a month to get whatever, $1 billion worth of content on streaming, I'm paying $17. I can go watch 1,000 shows, 100 of which are released every single month, right? Mm-hmm. So as a creative, how do you compete with that? Well, you do that on price. Well, you have to be doing that on price at $1 or 50 cents. But if you process through a credit card, there's no money there. You're going to make 20 or 30 cents by the time you pay the merchant bank and the credit card and Visa and Amex and all that. So that's part of the thing that has to change, is the financing of it, of how you get paid and how you earn money up front. This is a capital intensive business. You have to earn the money first before you actually start making it, or you have to borrow the money. No one's going to lend you that money. And a lot of times, financiers have taken a bath. So there's a lot of things that have to happen to make the change. but it will happen. Blockchain will make that possible. NFTs will make it possible. And God knows what other financing technology will come in the future. But there's huge regulatory changes or things that have to happen. NFTs and, initial coin offerings through Bitcoin and various other blockchain technologies are running afoul of SEC regulation and raising money from little old ladies in the Midwest that I'm using a ridiculous acronym or a shortcut, but an archetype. But that's how the SEC sees it. And everybody is a little old lady being taken advantage of by somebody raising a coin. And you have to be really careful about how you do that. So it's a complicated thing that there's still barriers to entry having to do with lawyers and legal and how you get paid, how you raise money. But as a filmmaker, as a young creative, if you can figure out how to get people to pay you, and I don't love the Patreon model. I think that's kind of begging. I think you should pay people. People should pay you for your product, whether it's a coffee mug or a t-shirt or a cap or a ticket to your movie, whatever, advertising, for God's sake. It could be anything. How you do that is just as important as the creative that you're making. And you have to make creative that people are interested in. And it's kind of just that simple. So it's happening. It's happening slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And technologically, we're there. Business, not quite yet. I also think filmmakers have to think in terms of, how do I build a business around this? If you and you're not going to do it all by yourself. You're going to have to find other partners. And when I say partners, you don't have to share ownership. You have to find people who are partner with you that will do a particular thing. So whether it's marketing or distribution or physical production.
Yeah, that is the conundrum that so many people, whether you're creative or even a solopreneur in a traditional kind of business, they reach that point where you can't do it all yourself. That there's no such thing. Yep. You're gonna have to scale, or if you want to scale, you have to bring other people on, and then that becomes a job in and of itself to find qualified people that you can trust and who will do the work, who have the skill. Because to your point, we've had this rapid, relatively speaking, in human history, amount of technological change, and we humans are, we're slow on the uptake. It's some people are like wandering out of their cave, still rubbing their eyes, saying, "What's happening?" They're looking around, going, "I don't even recognize this world anymore." And yet, again, you mentioned a streaming service like Netflix or HBO Max or any one of these, Hulu, and the volume of content that are inside of those is mind-boggling. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning, and I've gotten into the House of the Dragon, which is a prequel to Game of Thrones. So I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I was busy with raising kids and doing other things. I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I'm probably one of like 3 people on the planet who didn't. But
that was a commitment.
That was a huge commitment. So he was saying, how many episodes were it? So he said, you would need about 40 to 50 hours. He goes, well, you could watch it 8 hours a day for a week and get caught up. And I'm like, okay. And I'm going to do that. Why?
And when?
And when, because, so this ties into something we were discussing in the pre-chat about being a creative today, where yes, technology has opened the playing field, and there's on social, there are a lot of messages about there's never been as great a time as now to make money on the internet, and and then they list out all the things you have to do. And I've been on the internet since I came on officially in 2008, I would say. And I've been on this ride, and I have seen so many changes and experienced good things and bad things like everybody else. And I look at these and I think, the platitude of it's so easy, just anybody can do it. Oh, and by the way, I have this program that if you spend this amount of money, you can, this model really bothers me because it takes advantage of good people who don't know any better. And unfortunately, that's always been around. It's just now it's on the internet. So how are creatives, I'm going to ask you this question, how are creatives making money? What percentage of creatives are making money to your knowledge? If you fathom a guess, what would you say?
I think most of them are not making money. I think it's like anything else in the current economy. There are people who make a ton of money, and everyone else pretty much makes nothing. There's very little in the middle. And that's evolved. It's even happened in our business and entertainment over the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, maybe more, maybe even 20. There used to be a good living for people making movies in the middle and making television shows in the middle. And that has kind of gone away. There's the people who make a lot of money, and there's the people who make no money. And the only people making money in the digital space are what I call the tech bros, or more aptly, I call them the tech douchebags. They are picking our pocket every single day. And they're doing it because it costs nothing to write software, costs very little to put it up and get it out into the world. And they turn themselves into billionaires. And they, Facebook and Google stole how many billions of dollars from the advertising industrial complex? It used to be 4 networks or 3 networks and feature film. That has all migrated huge sums of money, like 40 or 60% has gone from the traditional advertiser into Google and Facebook, and then some of the other platforms. But if you look at the pie chart of where all that money is in tech, it really is in Google and Facebook. And that's changing to some extent. You're seeing it with some with Twitter and some with TikTok. TikTok is eating their lunch at the moment. So as far as creatives go, there's not a lot of creatives making money. There's some making big money, and there's very few making that kind of money. And to your point about the internet snake oil salesman is what I call them. Yep. And they are selling snake oil. There is no shortcut to building an audience. Oh. You just have to do it. And I don't love social. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's nonsense. And it's becoming network television to the extent that you're just bombarded constantly with advertising, which is what I hated about internet, which is what I hated about network TV as a kid, growing up in the 70s and 80s. The commercials, my brother and I used to make fun of them all the time. Mm-hmm. We used to do impressions. So
did my brother and me.
Yeah. It was awful. It was like 3 minutes, and now it's close to 10 minutes of ad time in a 30-minute spot, right? Yep. So the tech guys are the ones making all the money, and the internet, the creative side, is not really making money. I have no idea how much money they're making. I just see a lot of people spinning their wheels trying to do something, and I don't begrudge them at all. And I think you should use social and all the platforms to get your stuff out there. But you have to transcend that, because the way it's being used right now is, oh my God, I'm going to make this brilliant thing, and some executive in Hollywood's going to see it, and they're going to sign me to a big deal, and I'm going to make lots of money.
The lottery
doesn't work. It does not work. Maybe you can do that. Maybe you can build content. But if you're going to do that, and that's your goal, there's nothing wrong with that goal. Do it in a way where you're putting a little bit of advertising, maybe $5 or $10, to advertise your content. And I hate that word, content, because it just sort of strips away the creative that exists in film and television. But nonetheless, if you have put your content in front of the people who are decision makers about buying into your idea, you do that by zip code, you do it by city, you do it by hitting a particular kind of content or a particular kind of website that those executives might be looking at, so that they can see your stuff. And it's not a lot of money, but try it. See if it works. See if you can get the attention of somebody. That has to be supported by a website somewhere that says, hey, here's how you get connected to me, either through email or through a phone number. And, all of this technology is ephemeral. You can make it come and go at pretty inexpensive, and even in some cases free. So try something different. Or if you don't want to try to get the attention of executive and you actually want to sell direct to consumer, build a site that supports that. And it has to be you collecting emails from your people. Don't get into social and expect them to say, yeah, what we're doing today is we're going to be doing in a year or even 6 months, and you're going to control it. That you're not. You're the product, not the product itself. Mm-hmm. So you have to find a way to drive people from the social into your platform so that they'll give you an email so you can try to sell them something. And it doesn't have to be sleazy selling. That, hey, buddy, want to buy my shit? Doesn't have to be that. It can be completely different and organic and not riddled with advertising. Or maybe it is riddled with advertising. Depends on how you want to do it, So right. It's changing, and the internet con man needs to be sent into the woodshed. And I say this to filmmakers all the time. In Hollywood, when you're doing this job, you are making a living. You make a living by taking in money. You will never, ever spend money to raise money, to get in front of an actor I mean, in front of a casting director or a director or a showcase or anything like that, or get you're going to have to spend some money if you're an actor to make some headshots so people know what you look like and that kind of thing. But you don't spend money doing this, and you don't spend a lot of money. If you're spending more than $500 doing that kind of stuff, you're way overpaying. We pick up money. We don't give it out.
Okay. So you're flipping that formula the way people think that what you just described is how you do it. And it's not.
And you do it by building a network. You build that network by connecting with people. You connect with people by getting the first entry-level job as an assistant to a director, assistant to a writer, to some extent assistant to actors. Those are very few and far between jobs. They're hard to get. Assistant to an executive, a production assistant working on the set or working in the production office on a show, driving stuff around, giving tapes. Some of the old days it was tapes and scripts. Now it's all digital, but you're going out to buy stuff. You get those entry-level jobs so that you're in the grind with the people who are making decisions, and they go, oh, that guy's really cool and he's smart and he's dedicated. And the reason I got to where I am is because I said yes to everything. As long as it wasn't illegal or amoral or unethical, I would do it. And you got to decide what's ethical and amoral for yourself. But I had my standard, and I said yes to everything. And I did every project for a couple of years that I got offered. And that's how I got recognized. And someone said, hey, that guy's he's a go-getter, and he's going to do whatever I need to get done to get my job done. So let's move him on to the next one. And I got pulled up to the next big job. And then I got pulled up to the next one, until I got to be a production executive. And then from there, it kind of blew up.
Mm-hmm. So there still is a hierarchy, it sounds like, levels. You start here, and then you're visible, and you show up with a smile, and you say yes, and you work your ass off. There are some people, and you read about them all the time, who go from being obscure to being, famous. That will typically transpire over a decade. Mm-hmm. Their overnight career happened over 10 years. Correct.
So there's no such thing as overnight. And the same is true of directors and actors and writers. You're given the baby project, right? You're not going to go from being Brad Pitt interviewing for a job to being a huge movie star. Mm-mm. You're going to do something small. You might do a commercial. You might do episodic television as a coming and going role, or a small speaking part in a feature film. And the next thing you know, you get a bigger part, and you might find an agent or a manager who can help you propel your career into the stratosphere. By the way, one thing to add about that for creatives, a manager or an agent will never build your career for you. They're only good once you're successful and once you already have built an audience of people who will hire you. Built an audience. You're not going to be a writer and go, all I need is a manager or an agent. They're going to build my career. Not going to happen. And you're never going to get them to show your work. They're going to come to you. They're going to come to you because they see you out there doing something. You're either an assistant on a show as a writer's assistant, or you won an award for some kind of script competition you got into. They're going to find you, but you're still going to be the biggest purveyor of your career, not them. They're going to know how much you should get paid because everyone else is getting paid the same for whatever job you're doing at whatever time in your career. And they're going to get you into places that you haven't already been to and that you don't have access to. That's it. That's all they're going to do. So don't expect them to build your career for you. They're not going to do it. No, they're not. You have to be your best champion yourself and advocate for yourself. And don't be afraid. Self-promotion is not easy for most people, but it is a skill that is essential if you actually want to do something with yourself. It's true. And it doesn't have to be sleazy. It doesn't have to be, hey, buddy, let's talk about myself. You just got to catch up with people. You just got to stay connected and network. You do that by picking up the phone or emailing or texting, which, by the way, if you're a texter, it just says to the guy on the other end, hey, you don't really give a shit about me enough to pick up a phone. Most people don't pick up the phone because what are they doing with their phone? They're playing games. They're making movies. Talk with people. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Right. Yeah. It says something. It means something. A text is easy. You can have 3 or 4 text conversations with people simultaneously. And on the other end, you can see it. Yeah. You can tell. Oh yeah, where'd that conversation go last? I was talking to this guy and all of a sudden they disappeared. 5 minutes later, bam, they send me a text. Really? Yeah. Who else are you talking to? Mm-hmm. Right. Really? Oh, that's all part of it. Wow. Anyway.
Well, Tim, for people who'd like to get your book and learn more about you, where do you're not a big social guy, you said. So where do you hang out online?
Well, I'm not a big social guy to the extent that I use it for my personal life. For my business, I'm all over social and I'm out there all the time. So the best place to find me is at timtortora.com. And my last name is spelled Tortora. And on the top right, you can hit any of the social if you want. I'm on Twitter, although I don't do it very often anymore. Instagram and Facebook, you can connect with me there. Or you can ask me a question at the bottom. Just, fill out the form in the footer of my website and you can ask me any question. I get them or my assistant gets them and I pretty much answer all of them unless you're asking me to read your script or watch your showcase or watch your movie. I just don't have time. Not only that, but I'm not the guy who can help you read your script, So, but other questions about, interesting things that are of interest to you about Hollywood, maybe I can help. And if I can, I'll respond. If I can't, I'll respond and say, I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about that.
Mm-hmm.
The book, you can find the book on the site or you can go to career.timtortora.com and you can read about what the book is about, what we walk you through and how to get it if you want it. It's, I think it's $27 a book and it's a download and it takes you through that entire process.
That's wonderful. So team, the links to get Tim's book, learn more about him, ask him any questions you might have about the industry will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And before we say goodbye, Tim, is there a book that you have read that's been instrumental on helping you become the amazing person that you are today?
There isn't a book, but I read a lot. And I read a wide variety of things. Mostly what I read is related to finance because I'm reading Nouriel Roubini's book right now, which is about he's an economist who's often called Dr. Doom. But, I read a lot about finance. There's not a lot about movies and entertainment that is about the business. It's all about, being connected to stars and all the royalty of it all. And then obviously the gossip. But, I read all kinds of stuff and I read a lot.
Okay.
So I suggest you do the same.
Yes. What is the name of that book that you're reading?
Of course, you were going to ask me that. I can never remember book titles. I sometimes remember. It's called Mega Threats.
Mega Threats. Okay. And I will definitely put a link to that because my team PYP, we're readers. We love getting recommendations. And Tim, you have been fantastic today. What a interesting conversation. And thank you for being so honest and forthright about really the reality of it's not just about making it in Hollywood. What you described, you could apply it to any industry. It's about making connections authentically, being yourself, working hard, and, setting goals and going for it. And
it is.
I've just enjoyed this so much.
And it's a great business. I love it. That's why I do it. It's a black box for sure, but it's a black box you can figure out. You just have to apply yourself and you have to be willing to put yourself out there.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.